The moment those court papers hit the public record, the illusion shattered. This wasn't just another lawsuit. This was Prince Harry, shaken, exposed, and unknowingly cornered by his own words. The man who spent years screaming about privacy had just detonated the most intimate confession of his life, in black and white, signed, sealed, and impossible to erase. This story isn't about the press anymore. It's about what happens when paranoia becomes evidence, and fear becomes your loudest witness. Because buried inside those sworn statements, beneath the legal language and courtroom formality, was something far more disturbing than any tabloid headline. A portrait of a prince unraveling. A man who says he cannot feel safe anywhere. A man who sees danger in every shadow. A man who has turned his trauma into a legal strategy, and in doing so may have destroyed the last fragments of public sympathy he had left. Let's be brutally honest. These weren't leaks. These weren't anonymous sources whispering behind palace gates. These were documents Prince Harry approved himself. Documents his lawyers submitted under oath. Documents meant to help him win. And instead, they ripped him wide open. The irony is savage. For years, Harry painted himself as the victim of relentless media cruelty. He sued newspapers. He condemned journalists. He claimed he was fighting not just for himself, but for anyone ever harmed by tabloids. And for a while, people believed him. They rallied around the boy who lost his mother, the prince who wanted out, the man desperate to protect his family. But the lawsuits multiplied, the accusations intensified, and slowly, something uncomfortable began to emerge. Every case required more proof, more explanation, more detail. And the deeper his lawyers went to justify his fear, the clearer it became that the biggest story wasn't what the press had done to Harry, it was what Harry was doing to himself. To justify security demands, they described a man paralyzed by terror. To prove emotional damage, they exposed a mind consumed by hypervigilance. To show harm, they admitted fragility so severe it bordered on dysfunction. This wasn't vague anxiety, this wasn't understandable caution. This was obsessive fear, laid out line by line as legal ammunition. And suddenly, royal watchers weren't gasping at the press anymore. They were gasping at Harry. One insider called it the most spectacular own goal in royal legal history. Another said he had handed critics a complete roadmap to his psyche. And the reaction online? Brutal. People didn't whisper about it. They pounced. He wanted us to know how scared he is, one viral comment read. Now we do. Why is he shocked we're talking about it? Because once something enters the public record, it doesn't belong to you anymore. What made it worse was the contradiction. On one side, there's the California Harry, smiling at events, preaching mental health, posing as healed, free, thriving. On the other side, there's courtroom Harry, unable to feel safe anywhere in the UK, distrustful of nearly everyone, psychologically trapped in a permanent state of alert. So which one is real? That question is haunting him now. Those glossy Montecito images, they don't land the same anymore. The claims of peace? They feel hollow, because according to his own filings, no amount of distance, money, or protection has brought him peace. The sunshine didn't cure it, the mansion didn't silence it, the escape didn't work. And then came the detail that made even his critics pause. His lawyers didn't just explain his fear, they anchored it repeatedly to the death of his mother, Diana. Again. Decades later, her tragedy was dragged back into the spotlight, this time as courtroom justification. The argument was clear. Every media threat triggers the trauma of 1997. Every camera feels like Paris. Every headline feels fatal. Harry, they said, cannot separate past tragedy from present reality. And that's where sympathy began to fracture. Because invoking Diana isn't neutral. It never is. For many, it crossed an invisible line, from grief into exploitation. Social media erupted. She would have wanted him to heal, one post read, not to weaponize her death forever. Another cut even deeper. At some point, you have to stop being your mother's son and start being your own man. Inside palace walls, the reaction was reportedly ice cold. For King Charles, seeing Diana used as legal leverage reopened wounds that never fully healed. For William, the anger ran deeper. This was their shared trauma, and once again, Harry was putting it on display for personal battle. While William processed his grief privately, Harry turned it into public testimony. Sources say the word betrayal was used more than once. And if reconciliation was already fragile, this may have crushed it completely, because the implications didn't stop with Harry. By framing his paranoia as trauma-driven and inherited, the filings indirectly reflected on the entire family. The palace reportedly viewed this as reckless, dragging the institution into psychological speculation it never consented to. And while the palace stayed silent publicly, the damage was loud. Meanwhile, back in California, something else became impossible to ignore. Meghan wasn't there. Public appearances without her. Legal fallout fallout without her voice beside him. Sources offered explanations, busy schedules, separate ventures, but others hinted at deeper strain. One insider said it bluntly: she didn't sign up for endless UK courtroom drama. Every lawsuit pulls them back into the very world they claim to escape. Every filing generates headlines that bury their American ambitions. And behind closed doors, frustration has reportedly been building. Harry wants vindication. Meghan wants forward motion. Those are not the same thing. The cruelest twist of all, Harry's obsession with privacy has resulted in the greatest invasion of his own privacy he's ever experienced. Self-inflicted. His fears, his vulnerabilities, his inability to feel safe, all now permanent. Archived. Searchable. His children will read them someday. Historians will cite them. Court documents don't fade. And as public perception collapsed, the numbers followed. Favorability ratings plummeted. Former supporters turned away, exhausted. Streaming deals cooled. Brands backed off. Sympathy evaporated. The narrative shifted from wounded prince to man addicted to victimhood. And none of it came from tabloids. It came from him. The most devastating part? Experts reviewing his own descriptions didn't see strength. They saw warning signs, trauma responses left untreated, fear feeding itself, a cycle where every attempt to protect himself only deepened the prison. Harry wanted justice. What he got was exposure. And now the question hangs in the air, louder than ever: did he fight the press, or did he prove them right? And here's where the story turns darker, because the fallout didn't stop with public opinion. It crept into courtrooms, boardrooms, palace corridors, and the most dangerous place of all, Harry's own mind. Those security demands, they weren't just expensive, they were shocking. Armed protection around the clock, advanced security sweeps days before arrival, measures so extreme that even seasoned experts quietly questioned whether they were designed to counter real threats or internal ones. Behind closed doors, analysts reportedly whispered the unthinkable. These requests looked less like risk management and more like fear management. And that distinction matters, because once Harry's own filings described a man unable to function without extraordinary protection, the argument flipped. If the danger is psychological, not external, then no number of bodyguards can fix it. One commentator said it out loud when others wouldn't: this isn't about safety anymore, it's about spiraling anxiety. Former protection officers, speaking only in hushed tones, allegedly echoed the same concern. They described a pattern that intensified over time. More fear, more demands, more restrictions, even as objective threat levels stayed relatively stable. One officer allegedly said every added layer of security only made him want another. Fear feeding fear, a loop with no exit. And once that perception took hold, everything Harry touched began to rot. Because business doesn't run on sympathy, it runs on confidence. And confidence vanished the moment his own lawyers labeled him psychologically compromised. Who wants to sign a multi-million-dollar deal with someone whose public record screams instability? Who wants a brand ambassador consumed by paranoia? Who wants a partner whose next lawsuit could detonate another reputational bomb? The answer became painfully clear. Projects stalled, deals dried up, doors quietly closed. And then came the most humiliating shift of all. People stopped being angry. They stopped defending him. They stopped arguing. They just stopped caring. That's the real death blow in the public arena. Not outrage, indifference. Harry once commanded global compassion. Now he inspires fatigue. The tone online changed from debate to dismissal. "I used to defend him" became the most common preface before criticism. The disappointment hit harder than hate ever could, because disappointment means expectations died. And all the while, Harry kept fighting, lawsuit after lawsuit, statement after statement, as if one more victory would finally quiet the noise in his head. But every attempt to prove persecution only confirmed instability. Every effort to control the narrative only handed critics more ammunition. The paradox became inescapable. He fears exposure, so he exposes himself. He fears attack, so he attacks first. He fears isolation, so he burns bridges. He fears the media, so he feeds it endlessly. And somewhere along the way, the prince who wanted freedom built himself a cage made entirely of paper, court paper. The palace watches from a distance now. Concerned, yes. Sympathetic, maybe, but trust, gone. The unspoken rule has hardened. Whatever you say to Harry may one day become evidence. And nothing terrifies royal institutions more than unpredictability. Reconciliation isn't impossible, but it's radioactive. Because what family heals when one member keeps reopening wounds in public? And then there's the quiet question no one wants to ask out loud: does Harry even know who he is anymore without the fight? For years, conflict has been his fuel. The enemy shifts, the press, the palace, the system, but the battle stays the same. Remove the war, and what's left? A man man alone with unresolved grief, a man whose trauma became his identity, a man who turned pain into purpose and then couldn't let it go. Psychologists reviewing his described behavior patterns don't see villainy. They see someone stuck, trauma frozen in time, hypervigilance mistaken for strength, healing confused with vindication. And the tragedy is this: the more he insists on proving how broken he is, the harder it becomes for anyone to see him as whole. History will not remember these lawsuits kindly. It will remember the irony. A prince who fled for privacy and documented his deepest fears forever. A man who wanted peace and chose perpetual war. A son who wanted to honor his mother and never learned how to live beyond her death. And maybe that's the cruelest twist of all. Harry didn't lose because of the press. He didn't lose because of the palace. He didn't even lose because of public opinion. He lost because he couldn't stop fighting ghosts. And ghosts don't surrender. They just watch as you unravel. Watch as you unravel. Watch as you unravel.